All right. Welcome to the study group. Welcome, Chuck.
Thank you, Derek.
Welcome, everyone at home. Welcome, Kitty. Now, today we're going to try something new, and we're going to answer one question from some of the comments in our previous podcasts. And our first question is from Delaroscoe 6866. And they ask, I've always wondered if we will remember the way we died on Earth after waking up on the mansion worlds. So this is kind of an interesting question, but we were kind of expanding upon it a little bit.
Yeah.
And so we're going to kind of turn it into a little bit of a short study.
Yeah, right, exactly. So that's, that opens up the question, well, what do we remember in the next life?
Right.
And how does that happen? What are the mechanisms that enable us to carry forward memories from this life to the next? When we no longer have our physical body with our physical brain. So we'll be exploring that topic. But
how much do we remember in the next life?
How much do we remember? And then the corollary to that is, how do we remember?
Yeah, how does it all work?
Right, exactly.
All right, well, let's just go over some of the topics we're going to study.
Yeah, so I went through, kind of did my own little study of this question and came up with 7 different types of memory that we'll have in the next life, or 7 different ways of remembering. And right at the top of the list is the fact that we have an unchanging personality. So when we wake up in the next life, we'll have the same personality. So I'll know I'm me. You'll know you're you, or we'll know who we are when we wake up because of the unchanging nature of personality. But then beyond that, there's all our specific memories from this life. So our adjuster duplicates some of those if they're spiritually important and brings them to mind in the next life when we have a new kind of mind, a morontia mind. But that doesn't cover everything everything about us. So there's more to who we are. So in particular, as we go through this life and we grow spiritually, our character develops and our sense of identity develops. So those 2 factors are carried by our soul, which is another factor that is reunited with our adjuster in the next life. So we're going to look at that. And that our soul has the capacity to recognize memories, even if we can't bring them up directly. If we're reminded, then we'll say, oh yeah, I remember that. So that means that we can reconstruct memories that aren't saved by our adjuster. And that can even happen in groups. So that we can have shared group memories, and we'll explore that a little bit. And then maybe one of the most important kinds of memory that we have is the recognition of other personalities, the recognition of people we've known in this life. So that's a different kind of memory. So we're going to look at that. And then finally, the angels that keep track of us during this life keep their own records of everything that happens. So there'll be records of our life that are preserved on the next world, and we can consult those records. And again, through this recognition capacity, we'll recognize when those records are true and pertain to us, and they'll be reawakened as memory. So we have these kind of 7 different types of memory, or sources of memory.
Okay, so
yeah.
A short answer.
Short answer, right. Good question, but yeah, we'll approach it step by step.
So there's a look at the question one more time. And just so you know, thanks for the question. We appreciate it.
Yeah.
And we're just going to expand upon it a little bit more.
Right.
As to what do we remember and how do we remember?
Right. So once we've gone through all this, maybe at the very end, we can sort of give our opinion on the answer to that specific question. But we kind of need this background in order to do that.
Right. Okay. Well, let's read some quotes.
Sure enough.
So let's set the stage here of death. And it's kind of a trending topic. A lot of people are dying on the planet currently.
Yeah,
it seems like. Not to make light of it, but at the same time, this might be good information to pass along.
Yeah.
Okay. So the physical body of mortal flesh is not a part of the reassembly of the sleeping survivor. The physical body has returned to dust. The seraphim of assignment sponsors the new body, the morontia form, as the new vehicle for the immortal soul and for the indwelling of the returned adjuster. You begin over there, right where you leave off down here. So this is talking about the reassembly of what constitutes our vehicle and vessel and identity for moving forward, and that the material side is going back to dust.
Right, exactly. So this is a gift of revelation, really. I mean, as you all probably know, the information we're presenting here comes from the Urantia book. So we studied the Urantia book, and we've kind of taken on this role of teaching and presenting what the Urantia book says. And, you know, you can believe it or not. You can take this as science fiction if you want. I mean, it's like, or, you know, whatever. But we find these teachings very appealing because they have a coherence and they answer a lot of questions that have been part of, you know, the questions of the human race from the beginning of time. So we're really kind of enthralled and want to present some of these ideas because they feel true, at least, and we hope they're true. But this idea that going into the next life, our physical body we leave behind, so that means we're going to need a new body in order to continue our lives. So that's what this is talking about. We get a new form, which they call a morontia form, which is a new type type that we'll encounter in the next life. But even though we have a new body, that doesn't automatically make us perfect or, you know, turn us into angels or anything like that. We got to just pick up where we leave off.
Right.
In the next life.
Right.
It's not a magic ticket to anything beyond what we've accomplished in this life.
Yeah, and like I said, this first quote is just setting the stage.
Yeah, right.
Of the physical breakdown of this earth life, and then how we get started over there.
Yeah. Just a quick pointing to the mechanism by which this is possible.
Right. Okay. So when we're over there, selfhood persists in spite of a continuous change in all the factor components of self. In the physical life, the change is gradual. At death and upon repersonalization, the change is sudden. Human life is an endless change of the factors of life, unified by the stability of the unchanging personality. There's a lot of new introductions of concepts here, but these different systems in the human life, it's constant change. Yeah. Essentially, as our eternal career is a lot of change, but there's one thing that does stay consistent in spite of all that change. Right. Is personality, is what they're saying here.
Right. So our personality never changes, no matter what kind of new body we may get, or even during this life. You know, you think of, you know, being 3 years old, being 50 years old. You know, there's been a huge change in your physical organism, but you're still the same person. You know, you wake up in the morning and you know you're you. Right. And that will maintain all the way into eternity. And that's the one unifying factor that enables us to have this unity of stability through all these changes, is our personality.
Okay.
Which doesn't change.
Right. Now, moving forward, we do have the concept of the thought adjuster, right?
Right. So adjuster memory
is this one. Sorry, I flash this slide. So with the thought adjuster, the indwelling spirit of God, that little part of fragment of perfection that's within us. Right. So as far as what the thought adjuster has memories of or holds on to, in mortal will creatures, that's us, the Father is actually present in the indwelling adjuster. So like I said, that little part of God that's in all of us.
It's the indwelling spirit. It's our kind of higher self, you might say.
As you are the human parent, so is the adjuster the divine parent of the real you, your higher and advancing spiritual self. The adjusters are of God, and as far as we are able to discern, they are God. God and man are directly related. So this is interesting that it's almost beyond concept for certain personalities to even understand, fathom what the adjuster is, because it's of such pure godness.
Right. Yes. Right.
And so that's beyond a creature's capacity of understanding, but yet there's still a recognizability of its perfection.
Right. And it's alive within us. It's like our guide to eternity, you might say, or it's our source it's that well of inspiration that lives within us. If we become more aware of it, then we begin to approach. This is how we can become more like God, is by associating more consciously with this presence within ourselves. So this slide is just kind of an introduction to what the Urantia book means when they talk about the adjuster. So it seemed like it was just to get a little bit of a footing on the concept. And then they're going to explain how the adjuster helps us to remember this life.
Okay. Your adjuster memory remains fully intact as you ascend the morontia life. Everything in your mental life which was worthwhile and which had survival value was counterparted by the adjuster and is retained as a part of a personal memory all the way through the ascendant career. So the quality of experience and the actions that happened are kind of, there's photocopied on the adjuster. In its kind of factual sense.
Yeah.
Not so much the quantitative and qualitative or the qualitative analysis of it, but more of just the record.
Right. The adjuster somehow has a way of preserving our important memories. So when we reawaken in the next life, those memories will come back to us, just like we have them now. But they'll be coming from the adjuster. And we'll have a new kind of mind then, so that'll become, we'll have our mental life will benefit, obviously, from having these important memories of this life carried forward into the next. But there's some qualification there, as we'll see, I think, in the next slide.
Okay. The thought adjuster will recall and rehearse for you only those memories and experiences which are a part of and essential to your universal career. Much of your past life and its memories, having neither spiritual meaning nor morontia value, will perish with the material brain. Much of material experience will pass away as one-time scaffolding, which no longer serves a purpose in the universe. So we see this evolution of identity from material to spiritual,
right, exactly,
in the morontia self or soul self. And so this concept of consciousness and identity far transcends the brain, which is more the receiver of a lot of that mind endowment that we're getting. So with the brain, will go to dust. It's that fleshy material that will go, but the brain does have that connectivity point with mind.
Right, during this life.
And that's where it's serving its function. But now we're evolving to a different design.
Yeah.
So that's going to go to dust. And so this is really the kind of wake-up call to where's your seat of identity? Is it the brain?
Yeah.
Or is it actually, you're so in tune with identity of self that you can see the brain's function and purpose in your interaction with the rest of life, with cosmos, with mind, with deity, with each other, with personalities, and how it's our entrance into the mind arena.
Yes, right. And there's an interesting kind of explanation here of the mechanism for how we can carry our memories forward, because they explain elsewhere in the book, but even hinted here, that our specific memories are what they call protoplasmic. I mean, our brain actually has a function. And part of it is to store and recall our memories, but we're no longer going to have that material brain. So there has to be another way to preserve these memories. So the adjuster does that for us in a non-physical way.
So now we're talking about non-material survival.
You're right.
So what is survivability? And that's these non-material factors. And, we've done podcasts even of lay up your treasures in heaven or whatever.
Exactly.
So we're talking about building our morontia self.
Right. And we have done a couple podcasts on that topic. About survival into the next life and what that entails.
In Morontia now.
Yeah, right.
A lot of the afterlife stuff.
So this concept of Morontia is a revealed concept, but it's pointing to a type of reality, actually, or even a substance in some cases, which intervenes between the material and the spiritual. So during this life, we're kind of blending the material with the spiritual to create our souls. And the substance of our soul, or the substance of these blended realities, they refer to as morontia. So when that term comes up, just in your mind, kind of think, okay, that's a blending of the material and the spiritual. It brings this essence of spiritual values into a new form of manifestation that can become permanent.
So when they say your morontia self, we're talking about the next life, the
next life
self.
Yeah, but it begins actually during this life too.
Mm-hmm.
So
your soul, you're building your soul.
Right, which is separate from the brain, separate from our body. It lifts off of those things. So to survive into the next life, we have to create a version of ourselves that's not physical. And they refer to that as morontia.
Yeah, just for clarity though, it's not like split personality here.
No.
Not that that's separate. That part is separate. It's just is multiple.
But we do separate from our material body.
You will separate eventually when you pass away.
So in order to survive that, we have to have a form of ourselves that can be kind of lifted off. So our physical body is kind of like a booster rocket, that drops away and propels us into the next life.
Right.
Maybe is a way of thinking about that.
Yeah. Okay. Well, in the non-material stuff, this quote, but two non-material factors of surviving personality persists. The pre-existent thought adjuster with the memory transcription of the mortal career, so those records of memory. And there also remains, in the custody of the destiny guardian, the seraphim, the angel, the immortal morontia soul of the deceased human.
Yes.
So this is the guardian seraphim is like the caretaker of your soul upon decease or whatever.
Right.
Until there's a coming back together of the adjuster and your personality.
So this is our morontia soul. It's of morontia substance, which can be taken off of this planet to the next world. And our destiny guardians, our guardian angels, have custody of that. And that's a non-material factor that then is, well, we'll see as we go on. But we have these two non-material dimensions that define who we are. In addition to our personality, there's the adjuster and then there's our soul. So there's memory in both, and they're recombined when we go forward.
Okay. So the evolving soul possesses a continuing character derived from the decisions of its former associate adjutant mind, which is the decisions we make and choose in our mind, right?
During this life, yes.
And this character becomes active memory when the patterns thereof are energized by the returning adjuster. So it's kind of like a recharging, turning on, because you're shifting mind vessels or functionality of some sort.
Yeah, but you're still you.
Yeah, it's just the hardware's upgrading.
Right, something like that, yeah.
The soul of survival value faithfully reflects the qualitative and the quantitative actions and motivations of the material intellect, the former seat of the identity of selfhood. So meaning that we were identified at one point with the material intellect, and then the soul is faithfully holding on to a lot of the qualitative and quantitative results, manifestations of those decisions during that intellect performance or identity that we had in this life.
Right. We establish patterns of character, patterns of identity through our decisions that we make during this life. And during this life, we have what they call adjutant mind, which is associated with a physical organism. But the decisions we make tend to form our character during this life. So our growth of character, and that becomes spiritualized during this life if we're receptive to spirit. And that has to be preserved. And that's kind of different from just remembering what we did yesterday or something. This is our actual evolving nature.
Yeah, well, if you think about if you die today and you wake up on the other side, your to-do list is no longer really relevant. Unless your list was, increase in my values and discernment of truth, beauty, and goodness as it's reflected through the cosmos or something like that.
Yeah, and evolving your relationship.
And that's going to continue in your curriculum.
Right.
But all these material-minded tasks, those are going to change.
Right. Yeah, those are no longer relevant.
It doesn't mean not having the functional practicalities of right now in this life, but being aware of what values you will take with you.
Right. So, for example, if you've established habits of prayer and worship, for example, where you spend a little time every day, like talking to God or just feeling the presence of God or trying to grow in that relationship because of its transforming power, that will definitely be reawakened in the next life. So if that's part of your to-do list, is to spend a little time with God, that will continue.
Right.
So that's kind of what they're talking about with these qualitative and quantitative actions and motivations that take place within our material intellect. If those have spiritual value, they'll be reawakened and continued.
Yeah.
We'll recognize that as part of who we are, our desire to do those things.
Yeah. Yeah. Huh. Okay. The phases and forms of soul, these once kinetic but now static formulas of identity, are essential to repersonalization on the morontia worlds. And it is the reunion of the adjuster and the soul that reassembles the surviving personality, that reconsciousizes you at the time of the morontia awakening. So that's where there's a re-blending into one of the adjuster and the personality.
Yeah. I don't know if any of our listeners ever follow Quora, but I keep track of some of the questions that come up on there, and a lot of them are about the afterlife. And somebody asked recently, well, how can we, know who we are in the next life, or how does that even happen? And then the answer was, well, forget it, because you have a material body and that's going to go away. So your brain's gone. So there's no way you're going to be able to remember anything or have an afterlife. This is sort of a materialistic view of the impossibility of the afterlife. But what the Urantia book is explaining here is that would be true if that was all there was to us, was our physical brain. But that's not the case. Our physical brain is just a tool that we use temporarily. It's like an antenna that allows us to contact with spirit and develop in a sense of identity and character that's derived from spirit. And that can definitely be carried forward through the adjuster and our soul, which is also non-material. So that's kind of what they're giving us a way of understanding a mechanism. They're giving us a mechanism so we can begin to understand how survival is possible.
Right.
Because in our culture as it is now, which is largely secular, it's not believed that that's possible because there's not an understanding of this mechanism.
Yeah, a lot of the language around it is a little magical sounding.
Right.
Yeah.
So it's kind of what we're presenting here.
All right. Well, you want to read?
Yeah. So, okay. So, let me just read this and we can talk about it. With adjuster fusion candidates, which would be us. In other words, we have the Spirit of God living within us, and sort of the plan and purposes of that is we'll become one with that as we evolve and ascend in the universe. So that's what they refer to by fusion, where we become there's a fusion of identity between our human self and this divine self that's living within us. So we're candidates for that, you might say. So with adjuster fusion candidates, only those human experiences which were of spiritual value are common possessions of the surviving mortal and the returning adjuster, as we were just reading, and hence are immediately remembered subsequent to mortal survival. But concerning those happenings which were not of spiritual significance, these adjuster fusers, meaning us, must depend upon the attribute of recognition response in the surviving soul. So here they're introducing the idea that even though the adjuster doesn't remember everything, it remembers, it preserves memories that have spiritual value. But we have a lot of other memories that are interesting to us and kind of form our sense of who we are and our associations. So they're beginning to explain that those memories can also be restored and recovered in a sense. And that this is possible through this attribute that they refer to as recognition response. And in the next couple of slides, we'll see a little bit more about what they mean by that. But this is our method for recovering memories that are not saved by our adjuster. So that's kind of the important piece here.
Okay.
So going on to the next slide, they explain, when told about the events of the unremembered past experience. Now, let's say we have some unremembered past experience that might be important to us, but the adjuster didn't preserve it. So when told about the events of the unremembered past experience, there's an immediate response of experiential recognition within the soul or identity of such a survivor, which is referring to we're going to be in that position. And this experiential recognition instantly invests the narrated event with the emotional tinge of reality and with the intellectual quality of fact. And this dual response constitutes the reconstruction, recognition, and validation of an unremembered facet of mortal experience. So one way I like to think about this is even during this life. It's like I have a hard time remembering people's names, for example. Mm-hmm. So let's say I'm at a party or something. Oh, I know that person, but I can't remember their name, right? But so I ask somebody, what's their name? And as soon as I'm told their name, I immediately remember, oh yeah, of course, that's their name. That my memory of their name is reawakened, and it has what they call here this tinge of reality and quality of fact. Mm. So I know instantly, yes, that's their name. There's no question about it. I just couldn't pull it out of my memory. But I have this recognition response when told their name. Mm-hmm. So that's kind of a simple thing that I'm sure we all experienced during this life. But I think it's kind of what they're talking about here. So that capacity will continue into the next life. So there are a lot of things we won't remember, but if somebody tells us about something that we experienced, then, oh yeah, I remember that, and we'll know it's real because it has this tinge of reality and this quality of fact.
Yeah. One insight into that is sometimes you can have dreams and there'll be people that in your dreams, but they don't look like they look like, but they're still recognizable. That's a good way to testing your personality response.
Mm-hmm. So even in your dream, you'll have a response of recognition.
But they'll look different.
But it's them. Mm-hmm. Yeah. Well, that's kind of the ways. Who knows what we're going to look like in the next world? Mm-hmm. But we'll be able to recognize each other, both through personality and these other means that they're explaining. So this capacity that we'll have in the next life, this can be used to recover or reconstruct memories even within a group. So they explain here that since any one event may have a spiritual connotation to one mortal, but not to another, meaning if it has a spiritual connotation, it'll be remembered by that person's adjuster. It'll be live memory in their minds. But it may not be true for another person. Because of that, it becomes possible for a group of contemporary ascenders from the same planet to pool their store of adjuster-remembered events and thus to reconstruct any experience which they had in common and which was of spiritual value in the life of any one of them. Mm. So this is kind of a fascinating, I don't know, humorous exactly, but just thinking about that, you get a bunch of people from this planet together, and you have a party and let's see how many memories we can reconstruct or something. But it's so we can kind of reconstruct community that way and associations that we've had during this life and fill it out with the context of the experiences that we all had in common, but maybe weren't remembered by all of us. So in this way, we can then all have a reconstructed memory of the experiences we had in common. So that's kind of a cool thing, that's available, that we can actually do that is pretty interesting, I think. And then going beyond that, this gets a little tricky, but let me just read this. So this next type of memory is sort of what I call personality memory, or what the book calls personality memory, that we remember personalities. So, and the relationships we have with those personalities. So it says here that personality and the relationships between personalities are never scaffolding. So remember how they were saying how some of our physical memories are scaffolding that'll fall away. So here they're saying that our relationships with other people, that is never scaffolding. Mortal memory of personality relationships has cosmic value and will persist. So they're putting a very high value on our personal relationships and that they will persist. On the mansion worlds, you will know and be known, and more, you will remember and be remembered by your one-time associates in the short but intriguing life on Urantia. So let me just go to the next slide, where they explain a little further here. They say, while we understand the techniques of memory reconstruction fairly well, which is we've just been talking about, reconstructing our memories of events and things like that, we do not grasp the technique of personality recognition. Personalities of one-time association mutually respond to each other quite independently of the operation of memory, albeit memory itself and the techniques of its reconstruction are necessary to invest such mutual personality response with the fullness of recognition. So you encounter someone in the next life and you know instantly that you know that person. There's a just inherent in personality is this capacity for recognition response. But we may not remember all the details.
That's good.
Yeah, that's sometimes good. But how do I know this person? What were the details that constituted this full? What you talk about fullness of recognition. That implies, oh yeah, I remember we worked together on this project, or maybe we had a relationship for a while, or something like that. And through the memory reconstruction methods, then you can fill in those details that do require memory. But the recognition of the person operates on a different level that's not tied to anything physical. So this gets into some of the mysteries that surround personality. So this next slide is kind of hinting at some of those mysterious aspects to the nature of personality. Personality, the concept of personality as it's presented in the Urantia book is probably one of the most mysterious concepts in the book because it's the most real, but it's also kind of the most ineffable or hardest to define. So in the paper where they talk about personality, for example, that begins with this line, it says, while it would be presumptuous to attempt the definition of personality. So even the authors of this revelation, which are much higher beings, even they would not even, they would consider it presumptuous to attempt to define personality. So that kind of speaks to the level on which it functions. So then in other places, they point out these other things where they say that personality responds directly to other personality presence. So this fact of direct response is what enables this recognition later on. That same direct response will occur in the next life just as it occurs here. And the other interesting piece that's associated with that is that's also how we recognize the presence of the personality of God, is through the same mechanism, if you want to call it that, which is this direct response to other personality presence. And then they say this next comment, which is just like, when I read this, I just had to sit back and think for a minute, where they say the presence phenomenon. So the fact that personality has presence, and we can feel I can feel the presence of Derek. We feel each other's presence in this moment, in this room. The presence phenomenon of a personality is not a manifestation of energy, either physical, mindal, or spiritual. So again, personality is being described or put on this level of phenomena that's not like anything else, maybe is a way of putting it. It's kind of in a category by itself. It's
kind of cool, though.
It makes it very cool.
Because I always do feel this like incomplete feeling when somebody kind of says, it's all energy. Everything's energy. And to me, I don't know why it rubs me the wrong way, but it sounds a little bit like naive to the concepts in here. Even the Urantia book is saying, look, there's stuff even more than energy.
Right. There's realities that transcend energy. And personality is one of them, which kind of makes sense because that's the whole point. How you can only have love between persons. So if love is sort of the premier postulate, or most meaningful aspect of our experience. In reality, we have to, it helps to understand that is a function of our personness or our selfhood. And that's reaching into levels that go beyond, the color of your hair or your physical attributes or even your ideas in a sense.
And what it means to be loving. I mean, there's a lot of assumptions around that.
Uh-huh. Yeah.
But we do have a limited material mind intellect,
mm-hmm.
and that maybe we're growing to really know what it means to be loving.
Exactly. Right. And this capacity to recognize other personalities, other people that we've known, is part of that. That's what, sort of the carrier for those kinds of experiences. So anyway, that was come back to that maybe in another podcast, because that's a huge topic. But just to throw that in here, that's how we remember each other in the next life. So going on, there's another type of memory that we can access, which has to do with our angels, our guardian angels. And they explain that when a seraphic pair accept guardian assignment, they always serve in pairs. The complement of being one of the two angels becomes the recorder of the undertaking. These complemental seraphim are the recording angels of the mortals of the evolutionary worlds. The records are kept by the pair of cherubim, a cherubim and a sanibim, which are sort of lower types of angels, who are always associated with the seraphic guardians. So, we have like this angelic committee that's following us around everywhere, assuming we've been assigned angels. But that gets into details. But this guardian, the seraphic guardian role that angels play, they're assisted by cherubim and seraphim, cherubim and sanibim, and they keep records of our life. So they actually are keeping a record of everything that happens.
Yeah.
So that's another record, let's say.
Well,
so,
I like how they bring personal purpose to these names that are only found in biblical writings.
Oh, yeah. Huh.
That it's not just these little babies in diapers with wings that are flying around.
Right, exactly. That's what we tend to think
They
of.
actually have real purpose.
They have real purpose. Yeah. And it's a very serious purpose, too.
Mm-hmm.
So preserving the events and the memories of our lives here is super important, because this is our first life. This is our introduction to our universe ascension. So we learn and grow by the virtue of all kinds of experiences. Some, maybe we don't want to remember, maybe some we do, but all of that is important. So there's records, maybe they leave certain things out of the records. I don't know. But
there's no bribery.
We can't pay off our angel. I don't put that part in. Who knows? So anyway, this next slide is I just kind of came up with this image as a way to visualize the idea of going into the Hall of Records,
cool image.
on the next world. And they explain that these structures in the next world are open to the sky. So that's kind of suggesting with the stars there. And then along the background are all these shelves of some kind of records, who knows. But they explain that the children of the local universe, which would be us, children of the local universe, are enabled to repossess themselves of much of their former human memory experience by consulting the records of the mortal career filed by the recording angels. So when this life is finished, and we pick up where we left off on the next world, the angels that cared for us during this life and guided and guarded us take all their records from this life and file them. And we have access to that. So, maybe there's nobody, we can consult those records. And let me just go to the next slide, because it explains a little bit, again, how this works. They say that we can do this, we can consult these records and know that they're about us, right? We can do this with undoubted assurance, because the surviving soul does have a residual experiential recognition response to these unremembered events of past experience.
The memory can get triggered.
Right. Our memory can get triggered. All we just have to do is read about it in the records or be told about it or whatever, and we'll recognize those as true memories. So that's, again, part of this mechanism that enables us to return to a fullness of understanding of ourselves. All records are preserved in triplicate in the threefold Hall of Archives. On a system headquarters, records are always preserved in material, morontia, and in spirit form. Every occurrence of significance in the organized and inhabited creation is a matter of record. So, given that there's spirit beings, material beings, morontia beings, like we'll be on these future worlds, these records are kept in all three of those forms. And we can only sort of imagine what that actually looks like. But that's part of the preservation of the records of the universe. I mean, reading the Urantia book, you soon discover that there's huge amounts of record keeping involved. And it just almost boggles the mind to read about some of this and how it's done and how extensive it is. But there's a preservation of the past going into the future because that has huge significance and importance. You know, having that reach into the past, we can project into the future. It's part of what adds meaning to what we're doing now. So the preservation of these records is a very important thing.
Well, I always think about all the body, mind, spirit outreach booths that I've had. And how everyone has a booth for the Akashic records.
Oh yeah, right. That's a similar concept. Yeah. That's like a human idea about the same thing, that there are records kept of everything that happens. Mm-hmm. I mean, we don't have access to that during this life, particularly.
Now, I will say, though, that I think I don't know if we studied this about the angels, seraphim, and how they can be ideational clearinghouses and support projects, intellectual projects of individuals and groups.
Right.
So there is a bit of that library registry, like we were talking about in the records up in the mansion worlds. It's a similar aspect of how they preserve knowledge. And then it's open source almost, where it can be shared.
Yeah. So even on this world, those angels you're referring to, the master seraphim, as ideational clearinghouses, they kind of harvest the best of human thought and preserve it for future generations. And sometimes they have ways of communicating that into the present generation. So that's sort of related to the project promotion idea. And even the Urantia book itself could fall into that category because it utilizes many human sources. The ideation of those human sources was preserved or harvested almost, in a sense, by these angels and made available to the authors of the book. So that's
worth a study group in itself, though.
Yeah, that's it totally. But that's an example kind of what they're talking about and why this is important.
Yeah. Well,
so we have the question: do we remember how we die?
I'm sure we answered it.
Now that we're fully informed about all the types of memory, I guess the answer might be maybe.
Yeah. Well, and I would say we will be reminded if we don't remember.
Right. Yeah.
How we died. So will we remember how we died? Maybe. But we'll probably be reminded, most likely we'll be reminded in how that spiritual significance in our curriculum plays a role in our life.
Right. And if nothing else, we can go to the records.
Right.
And find out.
That's a good point. We can consult the records.
Right. And that'll trigger any memory that we might have had of that experience. But chances are it had spiritual significance. So it's probably part of the adjuster memory. You'll probably wake up remembering vividly how you died, I would guess. But maybe not. It would depend, I guess, on the circumstances. Yeah. But
so hopefully that answers your question.
Yeah, hopefully. Long answer to a short question.
Yeah. All right. Well, we'll keep doing some of these periodically. And we'll also get back to our ancient history study in Dalmatia.
Yeah, definitely.
So we appreciate all the comments and questions, you guys. And stay tuned for more.
Yes, indeed.
Thanks, Chuck. Good job, buddy.
Yeah. Thanks, everyone, for joining us.
All right. We'll see you next time.